This is the fourth part of the talk about the legal system of Pakistan from a communist point of view. The issues of Supreme Court or issues between the lawyers community and the High Court judges or Supreme Court judges is usually not of much concern to the ordinary person. But when the movement starts and when repeated strikes happen in such cases, it does affect the commoner. In 2007, there were many lawyer strikes, and the background was that against certain allegations against the sitting Chief Justice of that time, there was a very unwholesome type of arrest type of thing which was made by unidentified people on a road or something like that, and which led to a serious outcry, and ultimately this transformed into a national crisis, along with one or two other issues like the Hafsa Madrasa and so on. And finally, Mr. Musharraf, the sitting president of that time, had to resign and go abroad. Even recently, there have been certain allegations against some Supreme Court judge or so on. The basic problem is that the Constitution of Pakistan does have a Supreme Judicial Council, which is basically meant for allegations against the justices of the High Court. However, it is very unusual for a Supreme Judicial Council proceedings to finally actually remove a judge. Very few might have been removed and so on. The problem basically is that while the procedure is somewhat clear about the allegation against the justices of the High Court, it is not very, Constitution is not very wholesome or illogical about the allegations against the judges of the Supreme Court themselves, because it appears that there is some incorporation in the Supreme Judicial Council of justices of Chief Justices of the lower courts, which obviously does not fit very well. Then there is often a controversy. Each and every promotion to the Supreme Court becomes a subject of controversy in the newspapers because generally speaking, automatic promotion at this level sometimes occurs, sometimes doesn't occur from the respective justices of the Supreme Court, High Courts, Chief Justices. So that is also an issue. But of more importance for the ordinary person is that the bar associations, whether they are local bar associations or high court bar associations, they have got too much influence on the judges and justices, or at least they try to. This is evidenced by many things. For example, if you go to the High Court or the lower courts, you will find bar libraries where the commoners or the petitioners in person will not be allowed to use them because there is no commoners library for people to sit there or something like that in the High Court. And these libraries are generally situated in the offices of the office holders of the various presidents and general secretaries of the Bar Council, located within the High Courts, which is unusual when we compare to other professions. You will not find association offices in, let's say, in major hospitals or in other professions that the various elected body representatives have got their own offices or something like that, and that sometimes does influence the in the court case, because On one hand, there might be a petitioner in person appearing in the High Court. On the other hand is the Bar Association president, and who also has an office in the High Court. I mean, this is a very unequal combination. Another problem is with the people face is because the High Court judges have to go for double bench, and the Supreme Court judges sometimes they have got double bench, sometimes triple bench, 3 judges. So the total number of benches out of the 17 judges in the Supreme Court may not be more than 5 at any one time, which is very little for a population of 250 million Pakistanis. It's quite common, especially in COVID, even before that there would be postponement of case after the summons have been issued to the respective parties. Generally speaking, in the lower courts, if the two sides are equally balanced in terms of education, in terms of social status, and in terms of the number of sianas, that means the wise men, experienced men on both sides, then it's very likely that the course adopted by the system would be of justice. But same is not the case in which the one party is rich and they have got a high-powered liar who has got influence even among the judges and the administration, and the other hand is a relatively poor person who can hardly afford some new advocate, and that type of mismatch generally means that even for the judge it would be difficult to adopt any course. One day I was visiting a court and I saw that there was some kind of allegation of rape type case, and there was a young girl who seemed uneducated and quite poor, and probably the state had provided her with an advocate, and I was wonderstruck that a scene was happening, in the sense that some of the things which the supposed advocate of the girl were actually against the interest of the girl, and the judge immediately gauged that there is this crossover of sides and the advocate is not doing his duty, and he was trying to salvage at least the procedure of the case. Such things are common. For example, people have seen state-appointed deputy attorney generals and other state people who are appearing and taking up cases in the lower courts in front of the newly appointed civil judges. And the whole atmosphere is of intimidation, because these DAGs are almost the level of a senior session judge, and here is a very junior appointed civil judge, and I have even seen them trying to intimidate the judges. And this is happening despite the fact that when or at least the alleged fact that when the terms and conditions of the deputy attorney generals were settled some years back, probably there was this understanding before high salaries were given that they were not doing any practice. Perhaps that has been forgotten, although these guys sometimes say that we don't have the non-practicing allowance and we are practicing. I mean, this is very strange. Now, where does usually the performance in simple rent cases where both sides acknowledge a rent relationship, they will probably last for, although they should last only for 2-3 months, not more than that, but on the book, but they generally last, in view of the High Court appeals and so on, about average of about 2 years or 3 years or 3.5 years. The cases which are civil suits for possession or damages can take much longer. and civil suit for possession is generally a very common and favored suit by the people. This is because there is a general reluctance of the judges to take up cases under the Illegal Dispossession Act, which is a criminal act, because that requires considerable evidence and the time of the judges, who don't want to share with time given to other criminal cases and murder cases. Regarding the efficacy of the courts in ordering maintenance allowance for the children in cases of divorce case, that deserves to be improved, because it still takes several months for an order to be made, whereas it should be very quick. One of the problem is in the judicial system that because the judges want to retain perfect neutrality, they don't want to be a party in anything. So there is a tendency that they like that they don't have any investigative wing of their own. They are entirely dependent on the report by the police. And in the thanas of Pakistan, one of the problem is that we don't have a good master's or bachelor's system whereby there is a separate investigative cell, people who are educated and who are specially trained for this. And what we have is basically ASIs, SIs, inspectors, they preparing the reports on various forms, and it's a very archaic type of thing. And even in the report, there are usually hand sketches, and not even photographs are often added of the crime scene or the surrounding scene. And generally the matters are just settled whether somebody is present on the crime scene. I mean, whether he has nothing to do with it, he is in trouble. So this type of thing. And the prosecution, there have been certain appointments of special prosecutors in the later years, but generally that is not been very helpful. My own view is that for the commoners to benefit from the judicial system, it is very important that all the material which the one party has to present should be presented forthwith in the first hearing, and all the replies which they have to do it, the defendant party, it also must be submitted in the first go, but that does not happen. Then there is this problem of the plight of the judges themselves. There have been many events in which the angry lawyers have locked the courts from outside, or they have even beaten the judges in some of the less disciplined places, and the judges are intimidated. And if you ask the lawyers that why you are so violent and something, and they say, it is just because of our persistence and violence that the judges are forced to act according to the law and not according to whims. What a sorry state of affair, and the sorry state of the general atmosphere would that entail. One can imagine. But the basic thing is that gradually, at least the infrastructure of the courts is improving. When I first visited a court in Multan, Pakistan, in about more than 30 years back, I was surprised that the lawyers' offices were, in fact, at the court, were generally no more than certain benches and desks placed in what used to be the places to tie tongas and horses in the past, which is basically stables of horses at one time, because these courts were constructed long time back. Things have improved. Lawyers' offices are usually much better now. Courts are usually better, although still their architecture is unscientific and they are makeshift type of things. But the basic thing is that there is no workup on the in providing some link between the different laws and the methodology of applying. There is mostly tradition. Somebody just told me that there was an expansion of the judges recently in one of the jurisdictions, and many judges were appointed suddenly to help the people. And some of the judges, they were asking their readers, well, what is to be done in this case? In other words, it was clear that whatever you place that, whatever way you do it, you have to put either a pre-job training for the judges, or you have to institute an exam to test that. One problem with the judges, I mean, if you go to the courts, believe me, these guys, they are there right at 8 o'clock. They may not have any holiday on Saturday. They're just one holiday a week, and they usually have just, if they are lucky, they will have just maybe a guard, a record keeper, and a reader. Not everybody has got a typist ready hand, and there is obviously much less place for the clients to sit, particularly when all 300, 200, 100, whatever for that day there are invited at the same time. And there is all the time there is mayhem, and sometimes the weather is very hot, and these judges, frankly speaking, they work in very trying circumstances, and they have worked in COVID season, and many of them have gotten sick. It's not that they work less hard. One of the problems in Pakistan is that if you go to the police station, you interview the various police people, you find out they are putting their best effort. They don't even visit their houses that much, and they stay there just like military barracks, and they don't have really that much good a life. Many of them are diabetic and blood pressure by the time they are 40, 45, and general thing is not very good, and they work so much. Similarly, the judges, junior judges, they also work too much. And in spite of that, there is no law and order in the country. The reason is that there is no coordination, there is no procedure. If you look at the British criminal system, there was one interesting aspect. If one of the three persons, which I am going to name below, is honest, most probably a violent criminal will be behind bars either as a result of one complaint or the other complaint within 2-3 years. And these important persons were the police, the judge, and the doctor. Even if one of them is serious, is courageous, and he is honest, it is not very easy for a habitual criminal to be out of the prison for more than 3-4 years. The hand of the law is quite long, there's no doubt about that. But the problem is that supposing a policeman finds a dead body on a place, the first issue which arises is in whose Thana's jurisdiction it is. It might take many hours for this to decide. And then, they are not well funded for taking care of the body and so on, and to make all the arrangements and so on. And then if they are not trained to observe whether this is natural death or this is a violent death or something like that, now that puts the criminals in a great advantage, because unless the crime is done in a very atrocious manner with a lot of wounds and things like that, obviously it will invoke some response. But I hope that with the Nadra data coming up and this DNA testing, if it is done seriously, would result in some improvement of the situation. But one point about the lab. One of the problems with lab tests is that a prosecution which is based wholly on the lab test, whether it is the DNA test, whether it is some rape case or whatever, there are a few things which must be kept in mind, and I feel that the judges are sometimes not cognizant of this thing. When a test is done, the first thing is, has the specimen been taken from the actual person? Has this act of taking the specimen been observed? Has somebody actually seen it packing? Is there evidence that it was given to the lab which is going to process it in proper way? There was a receiver at that end. And then on the other hand, whether the technician has actually put it in the machine, then the machine is it is properly certified from time to time. There is somebody to certify that. Then the result which has come has been interpreted by somebody. And the basic problem is that ideally you have to ascertain all the people in the chain that they have really handled the sample correctly, and this is the result of what they feel. It is not a doctor's or anybody's domain to say whether the criminal is guilty or not. It is the domain of the judiciary. But their job is to make an opinion. Generally, I am very wary of relying entirely upon the DNA test or entirely upon any type of lab test unless and until there is a complete chain and certification by all the people involved in the process. It is sometimes possible that the machine is not okay, the machine has not been calibrated, the person who is handling the technician is not the one which is the usual one, he is just an ad hoc, he doesn't know how to operate the machine. Or even a doctor might have, who is reading it, might be on an additional charge and he is not that good, or these things can happen. And the same thing goes for the ballistic analysis, the same thing goes for other scientific evidence. But overall, if the visual evidence, the scientific evidence, the medical evidence, and the logicality of the thing, and the general demeanor and the record of the person favors such and such crime has actually happened, then obviously these matter. To rely only on the visual evidence, as I mentioned before, is again not very appreciated. And finally, let's as the source of law for all Muslims is Islam and nothing else. During the time of the Holy Prophet, as we see in some hadith, whenever somebody was doing a confession of the type which was quite of some serious issue which is quite punishable during the time of the Prophet, there are hadiths which show that one of the first things which the Prophet of Islam did was he would inquire whether the person among the people who know the person, whether the person is of a sound mental stature. It appears to me that even self-confessions were taken with a pinch of salt during the time of the Prophet, and several other queries were also done before any punishment is handed out. With this, I hope that I have outlined the entire scenario from a commonest point of view of the legal system of Pakistan. The purpose of all this is for the people to reflect, and for a person who is from the outside can sometimes see the peculiarities which a person who is on the inside, and for him this is all routine, would be tempted to miss. Thank you very much for your patient hearing during this time.